Okay, so thank you for inviting me to lecture on Brouwertijd's buildings of quasi-split groups over local fields. So today, I will introduce the main geometric tool to understand reductive groups over local fields, namely buildings. So this will be the opportunity to introduce all the terminology which presumably will be needed by many lecturers for this summer school. And I will go to more algebraic business in the next lectures. So today it will be purely, there will be, so to speak, no algebraic geometry for sure, and almost no algebraic groups. Okay. Okay, so let me start. Euclidean buildings. And so, what I want to, roughly speaking, what I want to introduce is a class of cell complexes, or maybe if we want to be a little bit more precise, direct products of simplicial complexes, which will admit, eventually, an action by the rational points of a simple group over some local field, the group you want to understand. And I have to introduce some terminology to understand better the space, in order to understand better the group, thanks to the interplay between the group action and the combinatorics inside the rational points. So this will be done thanks to a basic idea. The action of a semi-simple group over some local field on its Brouwertijd's building is, at the same time, it's very well balanced in the sense that cell stabilizers of simplices, will be compact and open in the group. And at the same time, so meaning that the group is not too big with respect to the geometry. This is one point. Stabilizers are reasonable in some sense. But on the other hand, the group is big enough to be transitive on the space in some very strong sense. Okay, so this is what I want to explain today. And the big question, hopefully at the end of the lecture, will be how to construct such a space once we decide the starting point is the algebraic group. But so far, what I will do is to first give you the axioms of Euclidean buildings. And I will assume I will use no group so far. Well, I'm cheating. I will use one reflection group, and that's it. Okay, so what is the starting point for a Euclidean building, or in a building in general? As I said, it's a union of tilings with nice incidence properties, intersection properties if you want. On these tilings, which are all modeled on the same Euclidean tiling. So the slices here will be called apartments. So these properties are requested in such a way that the complex is very symmetric. The complex obtained this way is very symmetric. and as such may admit very transitive group actions. Okay, so this is the general theme, and therefore the starting point is to introduce the tilings I'm interested in, which will be the models for slices or apartments. Euclidean tilings. So as I said, there is one possibility in order to introduce Euclidean tilings. If you stay, you can stick to groups generated by reflections, and one good reference is Bourbaki, Lee 5, which deals with the special class of affine Coxeter groups. But what is interesting in this reference is that first it's a readable one, okay, and second among the books, and the other thing is that the starting point is geometric. It doesn't start saying let WS be an affine Coxeter group. It starts with let H be a locally finite collection of hyperplanes in some Euclidean space, typically. Okay? And this is what we are interested in. But I chose another starting point, which is a theorem due to Poincaré. Let's say, I know, X, no, not X. Let E be a Euclidean space. Okay, this. But in fact, you can start with your favorite constant curvature space. It can be any constant curvature space. Typically, it can be a sphere. And if you want to do more exotic thing, it can be hyperbolic real space. We won't need it here. Let's start with the Euclidean space, say R to the n. And let's see, be a polyhedron in E. All of whose the hedral angles are of the form pi over some integer. Okay. Pi over 2, pi over 3. I have a polyhedron here. This one, for instance. Then extend the boundaries, the edges here, and consider the reflections, the orthogonal reflections in these hyperplanes. Okay, so we have a set. A finite set of orthogonal reflections. Typically here, now I'm considering 3 reflections. Then the group W generated by these reflections is Coxeter. Okay. And the polyhedron C and any W translate of C is a fundamental domain. For the W action. Okay, so this is the starting point I chose. And typically, I will consider direct products of such stylings. So let me mention a few examples. First, an example which is a bit boring because it's one-dimensional. You start with the real line, tessellated by, well, tiled by the integers or the edges whose extremities are integers, and you consider, say, reflection with respect to two consecutive integers. Then the group is the infinite dihedral group. So I'm a bit cheating because one-dimensional, I'm not sure it satisfies the condition on the angles. But okay, this is example 0, so it doesn't have to fit with the theorem. But still, it's interesting, right? Okay, second example, which is consistent with the theorem. This is the previous one, the one I drew in the statement. So it's always a challenge to manage to do something not so ugly. But this is, again, something I'm interested in. We have the chamber C, say, to start with. And we have 3 reflections. And this tiling is called of type A2 tilde. Okay, we have 3 generators. Okay, by the way, is it clear what Coxeter group means? It's the group admitting a presentation where you have distinguished generators, which have to be involutions, because what we have in mind is generalizing this situation. And the presentation is the simplest possible in the sense that it only consists in prescribing the orders of products of generators. So that's in some sense, after the free group, sure, it's the simplest presentation you can think about. Just prescribing products of generators. The order of the product of generators. You have a set of generators, and what you do is and these coefficients have to be symmetric with respect to S and T, and they have to be equal to 1 when S is equal to T, and at least 2, maybe infinity if you don't want to prescribe a finite order otherwise. Okay, and the example number 2, say, is two-dimensional again. And it consists in considering right-angled polyhedra triangles. And it turns out that it still corresponds to an interesting Coxeter group. And this will be interesting precisely because all vertices are not equal to one another in this example, in the sense that there is one right-angled vertex, so to speak, and two other vertices. I will explain this a bit later. I will explain why I'm interested in this example. Any question?
So in this theory, it can be any other constant closure space.
Yes.
Angle is an assumption, or?
Yes, the angle is an assumption for whatever the ambient space. If you like hyperbolic geometry, you take your favorite integer at least 5, and you consider the right-angled regular argon, and Poincaré theorem applies. Yeah. Okay. So let me state some terminology. C will be called, is called a chamber, a terminology which I don't like too much because there might be some ambiguity with the notion of Weil sector I will use later, so you can also call it an alcove. Which is Bruatit's terminology. Okay, and any cell in the tiling is called a facet. And by cell, I mean a relatively open cell. So to be pedantic, it's the equivalence class of the relation where 2 points are equivalent if and only if they belong to the same set of hyperplanes. Yeah. Okay. I will try to use the terminology closure of a facet when I want a closed subset. Otherwise, it's relatively open. Okay, so now let's go to axioms. Here we go. Let sigma be a Euclidean tiling as before. And let WS be associated affine Coxeter group. Okay, S is the finite set of reflections in the in the hyperplanes bounding C. Okay, then a Euclidean building or we can also say affine building. Building of type sigma or WS. Is a cell complex which is the union of subcomplexes called apartments satisfying two incident axioms. Two incidence axioms. Okay. First one. Whenever I'm given two facets, there is an apartment containing them. Any two facets, any two cells are contained in a suitably chosen apartment. This is the first axiom. So in some sense, if I want to do some geometry inside the building, if it only involves 2 points, this is Euclidean geometry. And there is kind of dual requirement. Given any two apartments, A prime, there is a cell isomorphism. So cell means that it sends cells to cells and it respects adjacencies of the cells. If they intersect in A, the images have to intersect in A prime along the same along a facet of the same dimension. So this is not a big deal because we know that all apartments are requested to be isomorphic to one another. They are all modeled on sigma. But the requirement is the fact that this isomorphism fixes the intersection in X. So these are strange axioms, I agree.
So you write that you require each apartment to be isomorphic?
Yeah, I didn't. Of subcomplexes. Ah, yes. Of subcomplexes. Sorry, yes. All isomorphic to sigma. Yeah, 2 will, yeah. No, but at least stating it this way says why we say building of type sigma before the axioms. It's not.
Yeah.
Okay?
In B2, don't you require that this isomorphism is for the whole building, which is fixed to?
No. No. Yeah, because no, you know, in practice there are some Euclidean buildings with almost no automorphism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in dimension 2.
I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm stuck. I have to get this board. I need to jump, or is there any device allowing me to grab the board, you know? What is it? Ah!
And you have to keep pushing.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yes, right, you're right. Okay. Okay, so let me now, since the axioms are a bit strange, let me give some motivation for them. So it's not exactly historical motivations. So the notion of a building was defined by Tits in the late 50s, in the 60s. Actually, Tits' goal was to define classical, well, simple groups, to have a uniform definition of simple groups, or Chevalley groups at least over Z. Okay, and Chevalley beated him in some sense because he defined Chevalley schemes before Tits managed to do it in a geometric way. But building became useful for other purposes. So this is basically the history. And so, and this is why also, this explains why we call the axioms incidence axioms, because Tits comes from incidence geometry. A topic which we forgot in the meanwhile, but which was at least interesting for this. Okay, so let me give now some motivation, which is not the historical one, which is a metric one. So this is why I'm saying I'm cheating. So what's the situation? We have a distance on each slice of the building, and we would like to have a distance on the full building. So X has a distance, actually it doesn't, but has a distance on each apartment. Isomorphic to sigma. And we want to glue the distances consistently. And this is what the axioms allow you to do. Okay, if you pick 2 points, pick x prime in x, you want to define a candidate for the distance in x taken in x. So a candidate for the distance between x and x prime in the building is given by the choice of an apartment containing them, say A, and then, so this is possible by axiom B1, and then set that the distance is this number. But of course, I made a choice. Okay? Axioms 1 allows me to pick an apartment containing x and x prime. My problem is that the distance may depend on the apartment. Several apartments may contain x and x prime, and this is where axiom 2 plus some work, axiom B2 plus some work, show that this number does not depend on the choice of A. So what is plus some work? Just in a few words, axiom B2 is designed to be able to define combinatorial retraction from one apartment to the other, fixing the intersection. Okay? If you fix in axiom B2, if you fix A and if you vary A prime, you have a retraction from the building to your favorite apartment A. And okay, this is a bit quick, but these retractions are nice cell retractions. So at the level of distances, it will be one Lipschitz maps. And this is how you see that the distance you compute does not, exchanging the roles of A and A prime, this is how you see that distance does not depend on the apartment containing the 2 points.
So you assume the apartments are isometric to start with?
Yes, I fix the distance on sigma, say, on the model sigma. Okay.
So I'm under the impression you're using the following fact that every automorphism of sigma as a cell complex is also metrical automorphism, right?
Up to normalization.
No, it goes up to normalization. I think it isn't clear.
What?
Because I'm not fixing a metric structure on a paramex, right?
Yeah.
But I guess if you have a cell automorphism, it can scale.
Well, anyway, if you have a cell, the group of cell automorphism of sigma is completely determined. It's W and Dynkin, graph automorphisms.
Right, so double is a
Yeah,
cell
so it's
automorphism,
yeah,
right?
so it says what you say in some sense. Okay. Okay. So now I have once I'm given a Euclidean building, I'm given automatically a metric space. So I get a distance on X, and I will forget the index X. Okay. So now we'll say a bit more about the metric, the properties of the metric. And in general, I will state some result on geometric properties. Of Euclidean buildings. So what I want to say is 3 different things. First, I want to give you, I want to introduce a tool to describe locally buildings. So in some sense, we will look at, whenever we pick a cell or a point in the building, we will look at its combinatorial neighborhood. And one important fact is the result that a small sphere around each point in the building is itself a building, provided you allow the definition of, you consider definition of spherical buildings, replacing Euclidean tilings by spherical ones. Okay, so this will be the first thing I will do. Then I will go back to my metric and say it's It's a nice one because it has nice non-positive curvature properties. And I will talk about also the boundary at infinity of Euclidean building, which is a tool for the classification of Euclidean buildings. Okay. First, local combinatorial properties. So we keep X a Euclidean building. Sigma. And let's say we have a Euclidean reflection group. We define Coxeter group. So W is a semi-direct product of its vectorial part and its translation part. Okay. And as I said, I want to describe the buildings locally. So we define we pick sigma, a facet in X. Then the link of sigma the combinatorial link of sigma is the set of alcoves C in X in the full building. Whose closure C bar contains sigma. Okay, so it's a set of alcoves. Okay, so typically in example 0, so what would be a building of type? A building of type D infinity, the infinite dihedral group, given by this first example above. It is a tree. Okay, so you have this is an apartment, and then you can have some branchings. What I did here is a bit misleading in the sense that in my picture, all the vertices have valency 3, say, or at least this is what it suggests. Well, not 3, maybe 4. But this is misleading in the sense that the definition of a building does not exclude trees in which all degrees are different with one another. So this gives you an example of a building with no automorphism. But this is typical to low dimension. I will go back to this later. Okay? But still, let's consider this tree. What is a link? A link for an edge. An alcove is an edge in that case. The link of an edge is not interesting. It's the edge itself. Okay? But the link of a vertex now, the link of a vertex is a discrete set of edges. Okay. This is not very motivating, but still now, for 1 and 2, the link, or at least for 1, the link of, for the examples above, which are 2-dimensional, the link of a vertex is you can see it as an incidence geometry. By this, I mean if you take a vertex, so let me suggest another definition of a link. You pick a vertex. Now we know we have a metric space, okay? The building is a metric space. Consider a small sphere of radius epsilon around the vertex. So what is a sphere? So it's the intersection of the sphere you have in mind with alcoves, which are triangles, okay, and with edges. So once you intersect with the sphere, so to speak, what you get is a graph whose vertices are intersection of edges with the small sphere and whose edges are intersection of triangles with the sphere. So this way you get a graph, which is the incidence graph, okay, which describes the way apartments intersect along the vertex. Okay, so a small sphere, sufficiently small sphere, at some vertex, V is an incidence graph. Okay, so vertices are in correspondence with edges whose closure contains V, and edges in the link are in correspondence with triangles whose closure contains V. So this is why I mean we will eventually obtain a geometric, a combinatorial description of how apartments glued together at the vertex V. Okay, so now I have to be okay. Maybe I will keep this one. No. It became worse than Institut Poincaré in some sense. Okay. So let me give you the statement now. And okay, fact. The link at any facet sigma in X is a spherical building. So what is a spherical building? It's a building where you replace sigma by a spherical tiling by a finite Coxeter group. In definition of Euclidean building, replace sigma by a spherical tiling. So this is why I stated Poincaré's theorem in some sense. By a finite Coxeter group. Okay, so we are happy because we get again some structure, at least locally, we get some structure. And it's enough, in some sense, it's enough to consider vertices. So I kept the pictures here because my two-dimensional pictures, because here, if you consider example 1, and if you look at a small sphere around the vertex, what you will get is, if the building is locally finite, formally you get a projective plane from the point of view of incidence geometries. Okay? And the last thing I want to say, because it will have connections with integral models of groups, is here you already see that here the building, so I should give some complement. The finite reflection group for the link is a subgroup of the linear part of the Euclidean reflection group. So in example 1, this is S3 for any vertex. And in example 2, it is Z mod 2 square for the right angle vertex. Okay, and it is the full linear part for the two other ones. Okay, I'm referring to this example. This vertex is bad, so to speak. Why? Because its stabilizer, well, another way to see it, the subgroup of W bar we are interested in is the stabilizer of the vertex in W, in the affine reflection group. So the condition we impose is that it has to fix the vertex. What is it? Here it is Z mod 2 cross D mod 2 because it is generated by the orthogonal reflections in these two hyperplanes. Okay? This is a bad vertex. It's called non-special because its stabilizer does not contain the full linear part of the Euclidean reflection group. A nice vertex is here, for instance, because its stabilizer in the affine reflection group contains the full linear part of W. So there is a terminology which is not bad and which has nothing to do with moral. We say a vertex for which stab, okay, a vertex V for which stab W of V is the full group W bar is called special. And this is a fact from Bourbaki. Typically, if you go to this reference, you will see that for any Euclidean reflection group, there are special vertices. Yeah?
In your picture, don't you need an horizontal way into the vertex, in a special vertex?
There is no?
Either horizontal way or vertical way?
Yeah. This is what you want? Oh, yeah. This is the tiling I had in mind. Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, by definition, the zero
Okay, in example 0, all vertices in the tree, all vertices are special because the val group, the stabilizer in the infinite diagonal group of any special vertex is is Z mod 2, which is the linear part of the infinity.
No, but I'm talking about the semi-direct product.
Yes.
So implicitly you assume from the beginning that you have a special.
Yeah. Okay. I'm choosing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. What Philippe told me is the following. If you follow Bourbaki, then you have to start with a purely geometric context, and then it's not clear you have special vertices. He says that from my point of view, for sure I have special vertices. Yeah. Okay. But again, Bourbaki is useful because when you do some descent, you have a Euclidean reflection group, which comes geometrically, so to speak. So it is useful. Okay. So now let me go to, this is more or less what I wanted to mention. And okay, just if you're interested, since you seem to be quite a lot to do some representation theory, you might be interested in knowing that special vertices are good for harmonic analysis on groups. Because if you consider, we will see that vertex stabilizers in buildings are maximal compact subgroups in the full automorphism group, say. And if you want to do bi-invariant harmonic analysis and consider convolution algebras with respect to convolution algebras of bi-invariant functions with respect to some maximal compact subgroup, then sometimes life is not so good in the sense that the maximal compact subgroups are not big enough to make the convolution commutative. And this is precisely when you take a non-special vertex. So one of the most basic results due to Satake and McDonald is the fact that you have to pick, once you picked a special vertex in the building, then the bi-invariant function with respect to the corresponding maximal compact subgroup, the convolution law is commutative, and you have a Gelfand pair, and you have dictionary with spherical representations. So this is why at least this notion has a kind of representation theoretic relevance. Okay, so now let's go to, this was the local description. Now we use curvature properties. Okay, so this is curvature. This is the word curvature, but this is not Riemannian geometry. This is curvature in very broad sense. So I go back to X, and its metric D, distance, which is Euclidean on each apartment. Now, here are the properties we will be interested in. So this is the reference for that is maybe Bruatitz. So basically Bruatitz consists of two main papers at IHES. There is one which was written in '72, which is mainly combinatorial and geometric. And the second one in '84, the second main one, was about, takes into account algebraic groups and integral models for algebraic groups. So the geometric properties in the sense of the distance on the Euclidean building is written in the combinatorial part, geometric part. But there is also a reference which is the big book by Abramenko and Brown. Okay, so there was and I recommend the part which is specifically dedicated to Euclidean buildings. Everything is written here with proofs which take into account some simplifications by Serre for the fixed point, which I will mention. Okay, properties first. The space X is geodesic, meaning that any 2 points for any 2 points, say X, X prime in X, there is an isometric embedding of this standard segment to X. So let's call it R, such that R of 0 is X, R of X, R of L is X prime. And anyway, the distance computed between 2 points is the distance in the interval. This is an isometric geodesic. So any 2 points are connected by a geodesic segment. That's it. Again, there is no machinery from differential geometry. This is what we need to define geodesic triangles in X. And that's it. Sorry?
There is unicity. No?
So far, no. By non-positive curvature, you will have uniqueness, but this to define a geometric metric space, you just need existence. Sphere is a geometric space, is a geodesic space. Okay, so this is the first property. The second property is the fact that the space X, XD, is complete. Again, in the standard definition of completeness for mere metric spaces. And then the third property is, well, I will now use a modern terminology introduced by Gromov. The space XD has the cat-zero property. Which is a non-positive, I will explain this, which is a non-positive curvature property. So what does this mean? It means that the definition is allowed by the fact that I'm considering a geodesic space. It means that whenever I'm considering a geodesic triangle, this means a triangle whose boundaries are geodesic segments drawn in X. Okay, so let me draw it this way with vertices X, Y, Z. Okay, so this is a triangle which is drawn in X. Then, okay, and the quantifier takes into account geodesic triangles. This is a complement to my answer to Philippe. Given X, Y, Z, a priori there might be several geodesic triangles. What I take into account is all geodesic triangles. Then I draw, so to speak, the same triangle in R2, in the sense that, well, okay, it will be not so nice, but I draw the same triangle in the sense of length of edges. And what I compare is the length of medians. Okay. This is M. This is M bar. Okay. And what I want is that for any geodesic triangle, we have the length, the distance between between Z and M, taken in X, is smaller by the distance in R2 between Z bar and M bar. Okay, so this is a very naive. The funny point with this definition, it's completely naive. Actually, it's very deep. Okay, so this is something you have to check for any geodesic triangle. So this is demanding in this from that point of view, but it's not demanding in the sense that it's completely elementary. You have no Riemannian geometry notion. Okay, so this is what you ask for. A Euclidean distance has to control systematically a distance taken in X. So why is this non-positive curvature property nice, combined with completeness? Because we have a fixed point. So now we go back. As I promised, so far there is no group action, right? Apart from on slices, on apartments, there is no global group action on buildings. But at least when there will be, we will have a fixed point lemma saying that any action by isometries, provided it has a bounded orbit, will have a fixed point. Okay, so we have a fixed point lemma called Bruyatit's fixed point lemma. For isometric actions with bounded orbits. So let me first state again a result which doesn't take into account any group. This is the following fact. Any non-empty bounded subset in X has a unique metrically characterized barycenter. What do I mean by this? In fact, I think this is a simplification. This is precisely the simplification suggested by Serre with respect to Bruyatids, barycenter. It is the center of a unique ball containing the subset, okay, say Y, containing the subset Y of minimal to be of minimal radius. Okay, so this makes the statement hopefully 100% precise. If you're given a bounded subset, you consider the collection of balls. It's bounded, so by definition, the set of balls containing it is non-empty. And then you use non-positive curvature. And to be honest, what you use is the median inequality of, well, in Hilbert spaces, you know you have a median equality, taking into account middles of segments. Okay, and what is cat-zero property here? It's just the median inequality in the right direction. So using this median inequality, you can prove that a sequence, this is what Serre suggests, you consider a sequence of minimizing balls, so to speak, containing Y. You consider the sequence of centers, and you prove that it's Cauchy by non-positive curvature. And by completeness, this sequence has to converge to a point, which again has to be unique by non-positive curvature. Because if you had two different limits, then the middle would be even better, would allow you to decrease again the radius. This is the idea. It's not deeper than that. It's beautiful. Okay? That's it. So now, the consequence is that any group action on X by isometries with a bounded orbit for instance, because the group is compact, has a fixed point. Okay, you apply this fact and uniqueness of the barycenter to check that if you have a bounded orbit, its barycenter has to be a fixed point. And this is useful because you can apply this consequence at least in two situations. When you take a compact subgroup in the Russian, once we know some algebraic group acts on the Euclidean building, we will be able to apply it to a compact subgroup of the rational points. This is one first application. And the second one, which is used actually to define buildings for any group, consists in, you know, the general strategy in algebraic group consists in splitting the groups and then to apply the descent of the ground field, right? So in order to define buildings, we will see that it's easier to do it for split groups. Once we have a building over a split group, we define a Galois action coming from the extension splitting the group. And the hope, which is a good heuristics at least, is that if you make the Galois group act on the building, the Galois fixed point in the building will be the building you're looking for. And to know that you have fixed points in the building, we will use the Bruyatids fixed point lemma, but this time for Galois actions. Okay, so we have two applications. geometric classification of maximal compact subgroups. And descent for Galois actions on buildings. And the last tool I would like to introduce, to define, to give you the main geometric tools to classify or study Euclidean buildings, is what is called the boundary at infinity. This is the third device. Okay, so again, it will be defined very naively. And again, what is nice in the theory is that once we will have an algebraic group action, there will be an algebraic group interpretation of this geometric boundary. But okay, let's define it in purely geometric terms. So XD is a building. A geodesic ray in X is a geodesic map, an isometric embedding, say R, from the positive half line to X. And again, the requirement for being isometric is just the equality I wrote before for geodesic segments. It's completely naive. And what we will consider is the set of equivalence classes of geodesic rays with respect to some equivalence relation which is defined again in purely metric ways. We write that R is equivalent to R prime if and only if, by definition, the sup of the distance between the points with same parameter stays bounded. Okay, so this means finite Hausdorff distance. And what we call the boundary at infinity of X denoted this way is the set of equivalence classes of geodesic rays with respect to finite Hausdorff distance equivalence relation. Okay, so typically two rays drawn this way in X will define the same boundary point at infinity. The rays can start at arbitrary distance from one another, then they have to keep finite distance for the same parameter. Okay, so this is not what is interesting. It's that it's another way to, so locally we managed to define spherical buildings, and now it's another way to define a spherical building. In fact, the boundary at infinity of X is a spherical building of type W bar, the linear part of W. So I will give you some hints about this. So this time, this is not the viewpoint chosen by Breuer and Tits. There is there are not so many metric considerations in Breuer-Tits. This is a more modern one, which is due to Gromov, and which has the advantage to apply also to other non-positively curved spaces, including, if you like, also Riemannian symmetric spaces. Then the boundary at infinity can be defined the same way. Okay, and what is nice is that if you prefer real Lie groups, real simple Lie groups, then you know non-compact ones, then you know that you have a symmetric space, G mod K. It also has non-positive curvature properties. So with this business, it also has a boundary at infinity, and the fact will be the same. Okay, so the boundary of a non-compact symmetric space has a spherical building at infinity. And this was already noticed by, in the 60s by Tits and used by Mosto to prove some important rigidity results. And then Gopal proved the same result for Euclidean buildings. But let me give you the viewpoint, let me mention the viewpoint from Breuer-Tits. Because I say it's a building, but there is no structure so far. So what can be the apartments at infinity? There are the boundaries of the apartments. Okay, fine. What can be the chambers? What are the chambers? Then I have to, in order to define the chambers, I have to introduce a tool which is a notion which is interesting in its own right. It's the boundary of Weil sectors. In French, it's called quartier, if you read Breuer-Tits. So there are the boundaries of Weil sectors in X, which are defined as follows. Pick an apartment, A, and inside A, pick a special vertex, V. So I pick a special vertex because now I have my apartment here, and passing through my vertex, I chose it to be special because I have the optimal number of walls, hyperplanes passing through it. This way, the stabilizer in the Euclidean reflection group of V is the full linear part. And this W bar acts simply transitively on simplicial cones. Okay. So W bar acts simply, freely, transitively on simplicial cones, which are called Weil sectors of A. And by definition, a Weil sector is in X is a Weil sector in some apartment in X. Okay, so you have the usual, if you do Lie theory, you know this picture because it's exactly the, when you do highest weight theories, it is typically the cones you consider. Okay, so this is a sector, Cartier. Okay. And if you want to define, so we have the apartment, so I go back to my statement. The boundary at infinity of a Euclidean building is a spherical building. I have to say what a cell is. I will simply say what a maximal cell is. A chamber in the building at infinity will be the equivalence class of a sector. Okay, and if you go to Brouillat-Titz theory, then since they don't want to do, well, it was not, some metric notions were not defined at the moment. If you go to Brouillat-Titz 72, then the equivalence relation on the sectors is quite different and it's more combinatorial. So this is a remark. First remark, in Brouillat-Titz 72, the equivalence relations on bisectors is as follows. We say that Q is equivalent to Q prime if and only if the intersection contains another sector in X. Okay, so what they do is they define an equivalence relation on Weil sectors in the building, and they say the set of equivalence classes is the set of chambers in a spherical building. So if you read, I think if you read Abramenko Brown's book, you will have the two definitions and their connection. Then the second remark is that the building at infinity is the key tool to classify Euclidean buildings. So in the same spirit as when I said building at infinity is used to prove strong rigidity statement due to Mostow and Gopal and so, then you can use the idea is to, if you want to classify Euclidean buildings without taking, with this purely geometric object, a Euclidean building as starting point, then the only thing you can do is to consider geometric devices, and in particular the building at infinity. And what TITS did is first to classify spherical buildings, and the outcome is that basically spherical buildings come from algebraic groups, classical groups, at least in higher dimension. Okay, and next step was how to classify Euclidean buildings. Well, I'll take the building at infinity, I get a spherical building, I know the spherical classification, and I try to go back to Euclidean buildings. And this is why I mentioned to Gopal the following. In higher rank, buildings all come from algebraic groups. Euclidean buildings almost all come from simple groups over local fields, except in small dimension. And you see, if you have in mind the example of a tree, you do have buildings without any automorphism group. Okay, you vary the degrees of the vertices in the building. And even in dimension 2, you have some A2 theta buildings with very, very small automorphism group, full automorphism group. And then, starting from dimension 3, you can forget these exotic counterexamples, and they all come from algebraic groups over local fields. So now, in order to prepare, I think, Gopal's talk, I will just finish by saying what a Brouillard-TITS building is. So let me state a theorem, which will be our goal for the the rest of the week in some sense. Brouillard-TITS existence theorem. Let G be a reductive group over some local field K. Then there exists a Euclidean building X depending on G and K with a GK action satisfying the following conditions.
So what's your definition of
Local field, locally compact. Yes, thank you. Locally compact. Yeah, there are better statements, but okay. Locally compact and non-Archimedean. Okay, you can take a complete discretely valued valued field with a perfect residue field if you want. Okay, so whenever you're given at least in this situation, whenever you are in this situation, you have you can construct a building admitting a GK action. First, the action is a cell is by cell automorphisms. And by isometries. Second, the action is proper. Meaning that facet stabilizers are compact. And kind of balancing condition, it is strongly transitive. Meaning that it is transitive on inclusions on inclusions of an alcove in an apartment. So meaning that whenever you're given C in A, C prime in A prime, there exists G in the rational points such that GC is C prime, GA is A prime. Okay, so I will stop here for today, but the point is, as usual in algebraic group theory, the question is how to construct such a space. We will see that it's easier to do it for split groups. I will explain what it is. Up to defining a Galois. If your group, the group you start with is not split, you know that in general there is a finite separable extension which makes it split. Then the idea is to define a building for the split extension. Okay, and to define a Galois action, well, you have a Galois action on the group. Up to some work, you define some Galois action on the building, which was easy, so to speak, to construct. And then you check that the Galois fixed point in the buildings will give you the building for the group over the ground field. Okay, but unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. You have to be a little bit more subtle. And this is the reason why there are lectures specifically on quasi-split group, because instead of starting from this standard theorem by Grothendieck-Cartier saying that any group splits over any reductive group split over some separable finite extension, you need something slightly better, in some sense slightly more precise, namely a theorem due to Steinberg, which says that if in the specific situation where you have a reductive group over some local field, then there is a finite unramified extension which quasi-splits the group. Okay, so this is the analog you use in the local case. Okay, and this is why Gopal will do the descent, and he will do some descent in the cases where the extensions will be nicely ramified. And this is why I will explain why we have to work a little bit, but not so much, well, much less than Gopal, to define quasi-split buildings. Okay, so we have two steps. Okay, thank you.